You are listening to the Motherhood Podcast, episode number 51. I'm your host, Emily Carney. We at Motherhood believe that there's no way to be a perfect mom, but many ways to be a good one. Our content is judgment-free within the context of evidence-based research. Hi, Alexandra. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So before we jump into all things cooking and meal planning and cooking tips, could you just tell everyone about yourself, your background, and a little bit about who you are?
Sure. My name is Alexandra Hieronymus. I am a mother of three daughters, 5 and under. And I went to culinary school for college, the Culinary Institute of America in upstate New York. And I love cooking. I love baking mostly. And just serving my family, loved ones, things like that. So I've been really loving sharing lately on Instagram, and it's been really fun to just see people also like trying my recipes and things that I've been doing for years. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really excited to be here.
I have been wanting to have someone on for a while now, as I already mentioned, to talk about especially meal planning, because as a mom, that's something that I really didn't get training in growing up, or I guess like not even really knowing how to manage meals for a family. I'm not trying to, say that that's solely the woman's job, but my husband does his more than plenty than his fair share of chores. And so I'm the one that's often trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to have for dinner every single night? So how do you strategize for meal planning and also just managing? I guess a big problem that I have is just actually using up all the food in your fridge and not having it spoiled because, one recipe might call for something and then you have this huge bag of it, but you only use like a little bit of it. And then I'm like, well, in an ideal world, I would have the same ingredients for multiple recipes. So I'd love to hear your approach on it.
Sure. Yeah. This was something that I kind of struggled with when I first had my daughter. Because I was basically saying I was in survival mode. So I was just like, okay, what do I know how to make? What is, easy to make? It's not going to be super expensive. And I basically was serving my husband chili, like probably 2 to 3 times a week. And he was like, okay, can we have anything else? So I actually heard this idea from Katrina Harrington. So what she did, she explained how she basically instead of meal planning with her cookbooks and a single recipe, she made more like a theme for the week. So Mondays, for example, I've altered it over the years, but in our house, Sunday night's pasta night. So we'll have macaroni and cheese or, spaghetti and meatballs or carbonara or something. We know that there's going to be pasta. And honestly, that's kind of a tradition that I grew up with in my family. I'm Italian. So it's we usually had pasta on Sundays anyway. So kind of carried through. And then on Mondays, this is back to the school week. My husband's a teacher, something that's easy to make, easy to clean up. And so we usually do breakfast for dinner. Sometimes that means just fried eggs and toast. Sometimes that means something fancier, like a quiche or casserole. Sometimes it means pancakes. It really doesn't matter. That's what I love about this system that I created, was so that you're not really pinpointing to one recipe. You're doing a theme. So it's you kind of work with it a little bit. There's a little more flexibility, because I know some people that love finding that one recipe in their cookbook that they want to try, and they go and they buy all the ingredients. And like you said, you end up using a teaspoon of this bottle of soy sauce or something, and you end up having it in your fridge forever. So I think that there's definitely a time and place to do that. But when you're working with kids and, time crunches and fussy babies, you need something that's going to work, that's going to be, cost effective, and that's going to be just seamless. It's just going to flow with your day. So to continue with my little meal plan calendar, Tuesdays are Taco Tuesday. So we do chili, we'll do enchiladas, something in that theme. Wednesdays are usually a wild card. Sometimes it's a soup. Sometimes it's hamburgers, or chicken nuggets. It's always something kind of not the norm. Thursdays every week is leftover night because usually by this time I've cooked 4 nights in a row. And so there's usually stragglers. And sometimes like we will each eat something different if there's not enough for us all to eat one big meal again. And then Fridays we do pizza. Again, that's a tradition that my parents instilled in us. And then we'll do Saturday, again, kind of like a wild card. Sometimes if there's a lot of leftovers, say like if I made soup and chili one week, then like there's a lot. So that might be leftover night. That might be let's go out to eat night. That might be like a stew or something that takes a little more time, like a roast chicken or a roast beef. Because when your husbands are home, like on the weekends, I feel like you're able to be a bit more creative instead of that kind of like, okay, it's dinner time, everyone's hungry, we have to get it on the table. So I don't know if that answers your question. That was like a long answer, but yeah, I feel like it's a really big thing, especially for busy moms, even busy professionals. Having a meal plan, I feel like it frees up your brain to just do what you need to do throughout the day and throughout the week, and also helps with your grocery shopping. So you're not spending extra money, extra time, trying to find certain things.
That's so true. I mean, even my husband always does the dishes. So again, like I really can't complain about always being the one or usually being the one trying to figure out what to do for dinner. But just as you were saying, it's more the mental load, I guess, of thinking of what you should eat for dinner, because a lot of time, energy, and effort just goes to even thinking about it. So I really love that you have this whole system of just having something within a certain theme or type of food for every single day of the week. I never even thought about doing something like that. So I'm definitely going to have to give that a shot, because that just having the, that thought process eliminated would be so great to have.
Yeah. It's just like a guideline too. And then also I've noticed that it's really helpful for my kids because they have started to realize like, oh, what day is it? Oh, we're having pizza. Oh, we're having, hamburgers. Like they start to get used to the rhythm and expect it. Almost like when you used to go to a diner and you're like, oh, it's Thursday night, it's meatloaf night. Like kind of like that, where it's like a comfort because you know the routine. So yeah, it's helped a lot. It's helped a lot without like making the same things over and over too. Because I definitely got in that rut of making like 5 things that I knew how to do well. And that was it.
Exactly. So kind of expanding on that, what tips do you have for coming up with easy recipes to use, and how do you store them in terms of, do you have a cookbook or are they in your phone? How do you have your go-to list of easy recipes, and then also how do you develop that in the first place?
Well, there's a kind of a mishmash. Like I have probably a collection of like 10 cookbooks that I find are like the ones I go to all the time. I used to have a lot more, but after moving a few times, I just realized like I liked them because they were beautiful and they had wonderful pictures. And like I liked the idea of maybe one day I'd make that recipe. But I found it really helpful just to say, wow, okay, Jamie Oliver, he always has really good go-to recipes. He actually has a cookbook called Meals in Minutes, where he literally, he'll create a whole like salad, entree, side dish, and dessert within one recipe. And so it's like doing the math for you essentially. And I found that really helpful. Cookbooks like Ina Garten's cookbooks, a few Martha Stewart's, like things like that have classic meals, things that are pretty much, things that you like to eat. I don't know. We like to eat Italian. We like to eat Asian food. We like to eat, like Mexican style food. Nothing too spicy, nothing too heavy, like cream sauces and things like that. So I try to think of that when I'm planning to, like, I love fish. My husband hates it. So like, I know, like, I'm not going to force him to eat it. Like that doesn't make sense to me. So, trying to like
my husband and I too.
I mean, I wish that he liked it, but it doesn't work. So I'm not going to like sit there and buy a whole salmon and say, well, this is what we're having for dinner, because he's going to look at me like, why would you do that?
Right.
So kind of thinking of like, okay, what do we like? What do we like to eat? And also like dietary restrictions are a big thing. We don't have any allergies in our family, but my extended family does. So thinking about that, like, can I, swap this, pasta for a gluten-free pasta, or can I, add potatoes instead, things like that. But really, I don't know. I guess I like to stick to classic things that I ate as a kid and things that I liked, as an adult. And I was like, oh, I can make that. Cooking really isn't my strongest suit. I was trained to be a pastry chef. So when I first started cooking for my husband, it was mostly just remembering things that my mom and my grandma had taught me. And a lot of it was just kind of like watching them do it. Like there's a few things that I make that I don't have a recipe. It's just from remembering, making sauce or making chili. Like I just kind of throw stuff together. But to answer your question before, sometimes I do write things down on my phone, or I usually have like a 5-star notebook that I carry around with me for like a year. And I'll put some like notes in there too. Especially if I find something that I've made from a cookbook and it worked and like the kids liked it and we were all happy. Like I'll make a little note and say like, okay, make that, or make a double recipe next time and freeze some or something like that. Because having leftovers, I feel like is a big one. We like to, minimize as much cooking, eating out, as we can. So having leftovers is helpful, especially because my husband will take them for lunch sometimes too. And then we use like those little Snapware glass containers to keep it all organized, which is nice.
How do you guys plan for leftovers, or like actually make enough food for leftovers? Because I feel like that's a big struggle, at least in our family, is that, we tend to eat as much as I make. Mm-hmm. So if we make a smaller amount, then we're kind of satisfied with that. But then if we make a lot and I'm thinking, oh, great, we're going to have leftovers, then suddenly we're like a lot hungrier that night and then just eat more. So how do you manage that?
Sometimes it varies. Like there have been times where I'll make a recipe and I'm like, oh, we'll definitely have enough for leftovers. And then it's gone. And I'm like, oh, okay. I got to plan better. And maybe it just does depend. Yeah. A little bit on how hungry everyone is. Is it that delicious? Like, I feel like that's a big one. Like sometimes when you're like eating something and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't stop. Like I just have to, it's so good. But I tend to kind of, so we're a family, let's see, Ella is a baby, so she doesn't necessarily count for a full portion. But if my other 2 girls eat a good size amount of food now, which has been really interesting because I'm used to them eating like the teeny tiny portions. Right. So like if I'm making chili, I'll use close to 2 pounds of ground beef. And then to stretch that, I'll add like 2 cans of beans. I'll add some diced tomatoes, things like that. And I will kind of stretch it so that it will last for more than one meal. Same thing with like, a lot of times I'll use like a rotisserie chicken, and kind of take it all off the bone and then use like half of it for say like a salad. Or, the other half I'll put in enchiladas and something like that, or chicken pot pie. And I've noticed that will go a lot longer. It's all about taking your proteins and finding a way to stretch it. I think that's like what my mom always told us, as kids, was like, you can eat your protein and have meat every night if you want to. But, when you're working with a family, like you kind of have to figure out a way to do it economically, because we can't all be eating like filet mignon steaks every night. Which, I was that kid that would like go to a restaurant and be like, okay, I'll have the filet. Actually, can I have the shrimp too? And like my parents would look at me and like, well, you can't order that. So it took me a while to figure that out. That wasn't like a thing people did. But yeah, just like finding a way, like adding some potatoes, I'll buy a package of sausage and take it out of the casing. And I find that taking it out of the casing is you can get a lot more of it instead of sitting there and slicing it afterwards. It's after it's cooked. It's like little things like that sometimes you wouldn't realize, but it makes it look like a lot more. And like, sorry, I'm like thinking of what we make during the week. And like sometimes I'll make quesadillas with a rotisserie chicken. And it's amazing what like you put in a quesadilla is probably, I don't know, like your hand, like your palm size amount of food. But in a quesadilla, it feels like the most filling thing ever. So I don't know. It's a little bit about like perspective and, yeah, I don't know. It is kind of interesting how that happens.
It's funny too, when you go out to eat, I've noticed that they don't really unusually include that much in whatever that you've ordered. So if it's like chicken in whatever, there's like a few pieces of chicken in it. And then I'm just thinking to myself that, it just gives you ideas to stretch things further, just as you were saying, because like a quesadilla that like you were talking about, when you make it at home, you think, oh, I have to put in all this chicken or whatever. But then when you go out to eat, and if you get a chicken quesadilla, there's like a few little pieces of chicken in it. And then you realize, oh, they just basically like sprinkled chicken on.
Exactly. Which I feel like is also a healthy way to eat too. Like we don't need to eat, like a pound of meat every night.
Right.
Our bodies can sustain on other things. And yeah, like we don't need to eat a whole chicken breast, especially now they're so big. Like that's a lot of chicken. So yeah, there's definitely ways to stretch recipes for leftovers.
How about dessert? I saw on your Instagram that you had a really popular cake mix donut IGTV. And it looks so delicious. I haven't tried it yet. But do you factor desserts into your meal plans during the week? Or how often do you eat desserts? And then what are your go-to desserts?
So that video was so fun to make. I loved doing it. They came out so delicious, like almost like if you were at an orchard. And just using a cake mix, like it blew my mind. But no, to answer your question, I do not add desserts to our meal plan. Desserts to me are treats. They're treats in our house. But I do love baking. So sometimes I'll make muffins. Sometimes it'll be chocolate chip cookies. Occasionally, I don't think I bake something every week, but then there's some times where it's like a birthday or we're going out and want to bring something. And I might make something a bit more frequently. But yeah, my girls know that, desserts like that are treats. And so like maybe we'll have something after a nap, maybe after dinner if they've been really, good that day. But yeah, it's not like a constant, which you would think like, oh, you're like, you went to a school to be a pastry chef. Like, wouldn't you have desserts all the time? But I try to kind of control a little bit of how much treats we have. But one thing I do as I'm thinking, especially in the past couple of months, I have been planning every week. I make a baked oatmeal, which essentially is just like, it's almost like a healthier oatmeal cookie cake kind of a thing. And I've been making that once a week for our girls to have for breakfast. Just so it's like really easy. They wake up so hungry. So it's delicious. Like, they really are really good. And you can change it up a bunch of times. Like I've made a pumpkin one this past fall. We made one with some apples the other day. Like it's so flexible because it's just adding oats and a few eggs. And I think I might have done a video, a while back, actually, not one of my best videos, but, yeah, so that is something that has become part of our weekly meal plan is, okay, we got to make our baked oatmeal.
Would you mind sharing the ingredients for that and just how to make it? Because I know absolutely. I want to do that and try it out.
Sure. It is, 4 cups of oats. I like to use sometimes a mixture of rolled oats and steel cut oats. Steel cut oats, if you don't know, are just, they're cut in a different way. So they have a more like chewy texture to them when they're cooked, which I really like that. And then I add 6 eggs, about a cup of sugar, but that's totally up to you. I feel like whenever you see sugar in a recipe, it's variable. It's like, if you like things sweet, go for it. Put the whole amount. If you like things like not so sweet, then maybe put 3/4 of a cup or like maybe add applesauce or something like that. And then about 1.5 cups of milk. And I've been using almond milk just because we have it. And but again, it's really flexible. Like you really can add whatever you want. A teaspoon of baking powder. I add about 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, a pinch of salt, and then whatever you want for mix-ins. You can add berries. You can add, as I said before, pumpkin, mashed up bananas, like 2 to 3 mashed bananas are really good. I've actually topped mine with pecans too and made it kind of like a banana bread.
Oh,
that
nice.
was really good. I'm trying to think what else. I've added raisins. You could add like jam if you wanted to, if you didn't have berries or something like that in the freezer, which I feel like such a staple to have frozen things right now. Frozen fruit, frozen vegetables, like they last forever and they're so good to add to things, especially if you're baking. And then, yeah, I think that's it. So I will put that into a like brownie pan with some kind of nonstick spray and then bake it for about 35 to 45 minutes, depending on your oven. I have an electric oven, and so it's always like hit or miss if it's going to actually cook the way I want it to.
And at what temperature is it?
It's at 350. Just kind of like, just like a cake. And I just will use a little toothpick or something in the middle. And if it's set, then it's great. And we will eat it. I have one daughter that eats it cold with butter. The other daughter likes it warm with butter. So it just like depends
this is making me
how to serve it.
And I just had dinner, but I'm also 46 weeks pregnant. So I guess.
Oh my gosh. Yes, that's true. Oh, congratulations.
I like how you said that sugar is a variable, because that's exactly how I always view the sugar ingredient too, because at least in American recipes, I don't know if you've noticed this too, I'm sure you have, that they just call for so much sugar compared to in Europe. I have some relatives that live in Germany, and when you go to Europe and you order dessert, at least in Germany, I mean, I don't know if this is in every single European country, but it's just not as sweet. You know, if you get an apple pie, it's not going to be that icky, sweet apple pie taste that you get in the US. It's more of just like cooked apples or baked apples. And then the sugar is more of an enhancement, just kind of to make it a little extra. And same with like whipped cream too, that in America, that's the only place that I've ever tried it where the whipping cream is just so sweet, the kind that you buy in a can. And then again, when you go to Europe, they just sprinkle sugar in the whipped cream to just kind of enhance it and not make it so bland. And then that's how they eat it.
Definitely what we were taught when I was in culinary school. A lot of my professors were German, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My father-in-law actually is too. So it's fun to kind of remember things. And I'm like, oh, you like that too? Like, I learned how to make that. But yeah, I think I've seen so many recipes, especially like in very classic cookbooks. Like I have like a Betty Crocker and like a Joy of Cooking, like kind of those staple cookbooks that you always have around. Right. And just like a plain old pumpkin bread recipe had like 3 cups of sugar. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so much sugar, especially since you're only using like a cup of butter and like maybe 2 cups of flour. Like the ratios of that is just a lot. So I think it's definitely, I think we're allowed to be like, okay, I'm going to change it up a little bit, and it's not going to ruin the recipe. I think that's the thing, is like a lot of people are like, oh, I have to follow it exactly. Right. And there are,
it's not like reducing the flour or something, which actually will ruin the recipe.
Yes. I mean, I feel like there are some recipes where you really should pay attention to the amounts. Like if you're making like a sponge cake like that, I'm sure there's like a whole reaction that goes on. But yeah, making a pumpkin bread or making muffins or pancakes, like things like that are batters and things like that, like they don't need to be that sweet, and you can really be in charge of that because it's your kitchen. You're the chef.
Yeah, and especially for people who have a sweet tooth like myself, I have a big sweet tooth that I'm constantly trying to tame, and then when I'm pregnant it's even worse. So besides denying myself the sweet treats, what I do is I'll make them and then I will heavily reduce the sugar. So it doesn't make me feel as guilty of making it. Like a few weeks ago, I made an apple cobbler and I put honey in instead, and I reduced the sugar so much just to make the honey more of an enhancement. So, and then I even ate it for breakfast because I'm thinking, I was like, it's just like having toast with apples, but in my head, I'm thinking, wow, this is dessert for breakfast. This is amazing,
So decadent, right?
Right, exactly. That's so funny. Yeah. So, would you mind sharing that other recipe? I know we're doing, I guess, a lot of dessert recipes, but I also want to get into a few of your other like meal type recipes. So maybe you could just quickly talk about that cake mix donut recipe, and then maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 of your favorite go-to main meal recipes.
Okay. So for the cake mix donuts, I chose to make them apple cider donuts, but you don't have to do that. You can make them whatever flavor you want, especially depending on what cake mix you have. So for that particular one, I used 1 plain vanilla cake mix. I used about 2 cups of applesauce. I'm sorry. I used 1 cup of applesauce, which I was using my kids' squeezy pouches because that's all we had. So that was 2 squeezy pouches.
I thought, I have those.
I was like, I don't buy them in a jar anymore because like no one eats it like that. So it's just the pouches. A 1/4 cup of melted butter, 1 egg, and then about a 1/4 cup or more of milk. Again, you could use water, you could use apple juice, you could use whatever you wanted. And then about a teaspoon of cinnamon. And the big thing with this is using a donut pan. And also, I mentioned in my video is I only have a 6-hole donut pan, so I had to make like 3 batches in order to use all the batter. And the biggest thing I've learned with doing that is you have to kind of like get all the little bits that kind of baked off and then respray it with Pam or whatever spray you're using. Otherwise they will stick. And that was a really tricky thing to learn. So you just kind of just mix those together. Really, it's not anything crazy. You're not, that's what's amazing about the cake mix is that you're just like, it's already done for you.
And you just follow the cooking instructions for the cake mix?
No, not quite. So it's the same degree oven, so 350, and then I would bake them for about 8 to 10 minutes. You want them to spring back when you touch them. That will be like the tell that they're finished. And then I took them off and put them out of the pan and put them on a drying rack with a sheet pan underneath, and I brushed them with melted butter. And then after that, I dipped them in cinnamon sugar, which was about a cup of sugar, I think, and about a tablespoon or maybe 2 tablespoons. I can't remember exactly, of cinnamon, and just mix that together. And you could do it that way, or you could leave them plain. You could add like a glaze or like a frosting if you wanted to. They're really customizable. And like same thing before, like you can make chocolate donuts with a chocolate cake mix. You could make lemon donuts with a lemon cake mix. I actually did one that were just vanilla. And I think I made like one of those like kind of like a glaze coating, and it was so good. They're just so versatile, and like, I don't know, I love donuts, and I feel like whenever I go to buy a donut, especially like at a regular like grocery store or chain, you get that like coating on your mouth that feels really oily, and you're just like, oh, this is not quite, homemade.
Right.
And I mean, a cake mix isn't homemade either, but I feel like it's a little bit closer. And it's really fun to do with your kids. My daughters loved helping to like ice them and everything. And they were definitely hard to keep in our house. They were just, everyone was like, ooh, I want a donut. Ooh, they're so good.
Awesome. I took notes as we were talking, so I'll make sure to include, for everyone listening, I'll include these recipes that you're talking about in the show notes.
Okay.
So if anyone's scrambling to write them all down, just, you can write them down, but you can also just click the show notes. Might make it a little easier for you.
Yeah, and you can always check my Instagram. There's info there too. But yeah, it's a good one. And then I'm trying to think of go-to meals. Do you mean like for the week, or just like my
I guess your family favorites that are easy and quick and maybe healthy.
So one thing I love to make is chicken and dumplings. This is actually a recipe from Martha Stewart. She calls for like using, raw chicken and everything. But what I love to do is So like I shop at Costco a lot. We have a membership. We get everything there. So they have great rotisserie chickens. And what I'll do is like, as soon as we get home, is like when it's still kind of warm, I'll take it all off the bone. And then to make the chicken and dumplings, you're basically making like a stew. But instead of it being like brown stew, you're just doing a really quick white sauce, which is melted butter, and then you put about like 2 tablespoons of flour and then just kind of whisk it together until it forms like a paste. And then slowly through that, you're adding chicken stock, or I've added water to kind of slowly break it up, and it will become like this creamy sauce. And then from that point, I'll add the chicken. Sometimes I've done like a really big cheat, and I'll use frozen carrots and peas that come in the little pre-made bags, and I'll throw that in. And then let me see if I can find the recipe for the dumplings. But off the top of my head, what I remember is basically it's like a cup of flour or so, salt and pepper. You can add herbs if you wanted to, like fresh parsley. And then you kind of cut some butter into it, and then add some milk or cream to kind of make this wet dumpling. And then once the stew has started to boil, you basically just plop little like tablespoons of this dumpling mixture on top. Then you cover it, put it to a simmer, and then once I think it takes about 20 minutes, but you can just check to see if they're cooked through. And it just makes it such a thick, cozy stew. And the dumplings are really good, and they're really filling. And that's been kind of like our go-to for this kind of season. Another one is beef stroganoff. It's my husband's absolute favorite. I make it for him for his birthday every year. That is with cubed meat. So like stew meat that you would get, about, I would say, an inch big, like a bite size. Sometimes when you get them in the package that are already cut, they're still too big. So you might have to cut them in half. And then to make that, let me think. This is another one that I kind of just like do it, and I haven't written it down. So for our family, I would probably use about 1.5 pounds, maybe 2 pounds of the stew meat. And then I would salt and pepper that and brown it in like a Dutch oven first. And once that's all browned, I take it out, and then I would add about 1 pound of cremini mushrooms. You could use white mushrooms too. You can do sliced or diced. Sometimes it just depends on your preference and also how big they are. Sometimes if you get those really big ones, it's better to cut them small. And then let's see, cook those until they're browned. And then I add all of this to my crock pot. Because it's such like you want the stew meat to be really tender and kind of falling off the bone, or not the bone, falling apart. I will, do all that searing and pre-cooking on my stove, and then throw it all together with some beef stock and actually a container of condensed mushroom soup. I found a really good one that's better ingredients at Trader Joe's instead of like the Campbell's kind of one that you can find. And it just makes it really creamy. You can also add some wine if you wanted to, and just let that cook and really slow until the meat falls apart. And then I serve it over egg noodles. And it's really rich and wonderful. And it definitely will become, I usually, when making that portion, it's something that we can eat twice. And yeah, that's a really good one for this kind of time of year.
I like that that's in the crock pot too. I think that that's really popular with moms and dads, that whenever my husband makes a meal, it's definitely the crock pot route. And I need to be better at making crock pot meals, I feel like. Now, I was curious, is there any alternative to browning in a Dutch oven if you don't have one? Or I'm just not really cooking literate, so I don't really know how you would do that or what a Dutch oven is.
Oh, a Dutch oven just means like a heavy bottom like pot. So like
Okay.
a Le Creuset, you could even use just like if you have a big cast iron pan, like something that's going to be heavy duty. It's not going to be warping your pan because you want it to be at a medium high heat to get the sear on the meat. And what that does, it's not like you have to do it, but it really seals in the flavor. Because essentially especially when you're slow cooking a meat, it can kind of get dry if you've done it, for too long or there's not enough liquid, things like that. So we're kind of just sealing in the flavor by browning it. And it also just will enhance the whole dish as well. But that's, again, totally up to you. Depends. I used to have a crock pot that I could brown in it and then just like turn it on. It seemed like a really great crock pot, but after like a year of using it, it died. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to like a regular, really like, standard crock pot, and it's been much better.
Right.
Which I've actually seen some people do like on Pinterest, where if you turn it on high and leave the lid off, you can kind of do the same thing, but it's not quite as strong.
What about Insta Pot? I've heard some good things about that. Is that...
I have two. I do not have one. But like my mom has one and she loves that she can make a sweet potato in like 8 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's like, there's definitely convenience to it. I like to minimize the amount of kitchen tools I have. Like I want to make sure that my kitchen is really serving me and not the other way around. So I know that I'll use a crock pot way more. I don't really want to have a crock pot and an Insta Pot. So I might wait and see if it's worth switching at one point. But I've heard great things. I've heard people say it really helps, with having dinner done quickly. So I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for that one, but crock pots are so helpful. I wish I used it more when I was like a first time mom, because learning how to cook again after you just had a baby, I feel like is a difficult task.
Definitely.
That's why we ate so much chili. It was just like, I know I can make this and it'll last all week.
Exactly.
Now we're trying to be a little bit more creative. And then I can't think of another one. I mean, I could tell you how I make chili if that helps, because I feel like that is something I do make probably once or twice a month.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So as I said before, I'll probably use about 2 pounds of ground beef just for our family size and just so that we have a little bit extra. And I will brown that in the pan. And at that point too, like that's when I season it. When it's just the ground beef, like I'll put about a teaspoon, I'd say, of like turmeric. I'll put some garlic powder. I like to use, we don't do like big spice in our house, but I will use smoked paprika and a little bit of chipotle powder, which is a smoked chili powder. And those I've noticed, they really deliver in flavor, but they're not super spicy. Like my kids don't notice it. And it definitely helps give it that kind of like chili vibe. And then I'll add 2 cans of rinsed, drained black beans. I use Goya just because I feel like they're the only ones I've found that don't have salt in them. And then I'll add a big can of diced tomatoes. Again, unsalted. I know sometimes they salt things and I just feel like it's unnecessary. And I'll let that cook by itself for a while, just so it gets, the meat is all soft and the vegetables start to kind of break down a little bit. And then right before I'm about to serve it, maybe like 10, 15 minutes before, I'll add probably a cup of corn. And then sometimes I'll be really sneaky and like our grocery store sells frozen diced butternut squash. Sometimes I'll throw some of that in and no one knows. They think it's like a carrot. I'm like, yeah, sure. It's a carrot. And sometimes I'll add some frozen spinach when it's all like really broken up so that it's like you can barely tell that it's spinach. Just to kind of add some vegetables that are not really noticeable. And And then we will serve that over either white rice or sometimes I'll make yellow rice. And yeah, you can also use that too. If you eliminated some of the liquid from the tomatoes, you can make it more of like a drier chili and add it to like a burrito. So definitely you can kind of like be more flexible with it. I've done a few variations. Like a few weeks ago, I just did, I diced an onion, and then I did the same thing, ground beef and the beans. And then I added corn, and that was it. I didn't add tomatoes, and it was much drier. And that was what we put in our burritos. So it's like, for a while I was making burritos like Chipotle. I was like layering each ingredient, and like everything was cold. And I was like, why is that? Like, there must be a better way to do this. And then I was like, oh, I'm just going to mix it all together before I serve it. And then we're just going to like scoop it and put it in our burrito. And like, that makes it so much better.
That's such a good idea. Do you have any other cool tips for how to use chili in a unique way? I've never thought of using it for a burrito. I mean, I just love that.
Yeah. So I've done, I've put it over pasta. I've mixed it into macaroni and cheese. You can sprinkle it on some tortilla chips and make really quick nachos. I feel like those kinds of things, like you can just kind of do whatever with it. It's like meat, cheese, beans. Like it's the three staples in most cuisines, really. So yeah, there's a lot of things you can do with chili. Tortillas are a big thing in our house. And yeah, rice, any kind of rice. You could probably even like mix it with some like lentils if you wanted to. Or put it on like a salad if it wasn't like piping hot, and make like a taco salad. Yeah.
I love this idea of repurposing the same meal and using the ingredients like that. That's such a great idea.
Well, I'm glad you like it.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and joining us today and sharing your culinary knowledge and everything. I really enjoyed our conversation. And ending on a personal note, one question that we always ask every guest who's on our show is, when is a time that you realize it's okay to not be perfect and okay to be good instead?
Absolutely. I feel like that comes with motherhood, and especially of multiple children. You realize that, the standards you had when you had one child are very different from the standards you have when you have two, or three, or whatever the number is. But yeah, definitely have learned that. I mean, and still learning it. I am a perfectionist at heart. I love things to be just so. So definitely still kind of working through that journey of figuring things out and trial and error, really, seeing how to make those little adjustments. But yeah, this was so fun. I loved our chat, and thank you so much, Emily.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you so much.